Hey everybody, Nick here, and today I got a review for you of this little guy. This is the Arcform Slimfoot. Thank you very much first off to my viewer John who sent this guy along. This is a knife that I'd seen, but I've been getting a lot of requests about, and so John, thank you much for making it possible for me to take a look here. Next thing, size comparison as always. Here's your Ontario rat number 1 and rat number 2. So you can see intermediate size range, about 3.5 inches of blade. So there's that, and then of course with your Spyderco Delica. One thing to note, with a name like Slimfoot, you would expect this to be a slim and svelte little number, but it is very much not. As a matter of fact, this is the thickest knife on my table by a substantial margin. If we compare it to your Spyderco Delica here, it's thicker, and compare it to your rat number 1, which usually wins that round, it's absolutely thicker. So don't let the name fool you. This is not a slim foot. Well, it's maybe a foot or so worth of slim. But anyways, there you go. The company itself is named Arcform, and it is a brand new company. I believe this is their very first knife release. And rather than trying to describe them, let's just read directly from their website. Arcform is a knife company. More than that, we are a knife company that is changing the game. Every Arcform knife is manufactured with materials and craftsmanship that soar above and beyond knives of the same caliber. You want a knife with stunning design and high usability? We've got that. Arcform doesn't roll with the run-of-the-mill ordinary. We are a group of visionaries, trendsetters, and looking to redefine quality. Join us in the movement. Sorry, guys. Should get that looked at. Anyways, that's quite a mouthful there, and so they're redefining quality and whatnot, and the way that they're doing that is actually by working with Rayot knives. Rayot is a well-known Chinese manufacturer with very good quality control, great factory. Rayot is a great choice, 100%. So that's Arcform, and let's go on ahead and talk about the good, the great, the bad, and the ugly of your Arcform Slimfoot here. So on the good side, first off, I do love the website. There was the dramatic reading there, and it really required it, but they're doing a great job of poking fun at the marketing speak of the knife world. So that's great. I appreciate very much that they're doing that. I'm completely beside the point. Speaking of beside the point, I do love the packaging that this guy came in. My buddy John sent this with the packaging, and indeed, it is a very, very nicely packaged little knife. Comes in a pretty little box, complete with, everything you need here. And, we sweat the details. Indeed, they're really playing with that. So that's really neat, and I like the packaging very much. Next thing, I actually love the Arcform logo. I think it's a really beautifully designed logo type, and I think it looks great on a knife. It's one of those things that is very simple, it's very minimal, but very, very nicely done, and it serves to distinguish the brand at an instant, which is pretty excellent. There are some very nice elements of this blade here, too. For instance, the fact that it is S35VN is a great steel. It's toward the top of the line. No problems there. The blade finish on it is nice. It's sort of a polishy stonewash sort of thing. It's great. It picks up, plays with the light, and it cleans off very nicely, which is very good. I do love myself a good sheep's footy sort of blade. They're great. And for the kinds of cutting I do, they tend to be pretty excellent. The hollow grind on this is actually very much a standout for me because it makes this knife cut a lot better than the stock thickness might make you think otherwise. You've got a very, very hollow grind to it, so it comes to a pretty acute edge, and so if you're just cutting something without a lot of resistance, this actually cuts pretty well. It makes it cut a lot better than you'd expect, so that's really great. Next thing, this has a relatively small and subtle flipper tab. In a world where flipper tabs are often huge, long pocket peckers, this was pretty excellently done. And, it's got some, very sharp jimping there that they could knock down a little bit, but on the whole, I love this freaking flipper tab. I think they've done a great job making that happen, and so that's nice. Next thing, the back spacer on this. To me, this is the most interesting aspect of this knife in terms of design. It's just, look, it's a little tiny detail. It has zero functional purpose, but at the same time, it is unquestionably pretty. They've got very nice little machining in there. They've got the little groove in the center. It's just, I look down at that, it's like, okay, that's really nice. That's a nice little extra step that they took there. And so it's nice for them to take those extra steps to show off some, design chops, if you will. So that's nice. The clip on this guy is actually pretty good. You've got a fair amount of spring to it, which is very nice. And, it works. It looks very pretty. It works with the overall design aesthetic very nicely. I like the clip on this. That's very, very nice. Next thing, on that website, they have their warranty, and the warranty is actually very, very maintenance friendly. This is something I check out with any new or small knife making company, at least when I remember to. And on their website, they actually have damage covered by abuse, neglect, or failure to perform maintenance or prying is not covered. A failure to perform maintenance or prying. There's a comma in there I didn't say. But look, the fact that they are not only saying maintenance is fine, but they're saying that, look, don't screw it up by not maintaining the knife is spectacular. This is just the kind of attitude I want to see from a knife-making company, and so that is a great thing that Arcform is doing there, and I got to recognize it. Then finally, I gotta say, the knife is very, very attractive. It is a cross between sort of a straight razor sort of aesthetic on one side and Blade Runner on the other side. It's got a little bit of science fiction to it. This is unquestionably a gorgeous knife on the table, and even flipping it over, this is very, very pretty. The logotypes are nice. It is a gorgeous freaking knife. And so I gotta give it that, and that to me is the good here. Very pretty, very maintenance-friendly warranty with a nice clip, nice backspacer very much. The flipper tab is not a huge pocket pecker. There are some nice elements of the blade, including a very nice hollow grind on it. The Arcform logo is excellent, the packaging is great, and the website is doing a great job of making fun of. So I appreciated that very much. Let's talk about what's great about this knife. What is absolutely great about this knife is the construction of it. What I mean by that is you can very clearly see the mastery that Rayot brings to the table on something like this, because the action on the knife is absolutely excellent. Especially once I cleaned it out. With this heavy blade, it just absolutely drops shut, and the action is 100% reliable deployment, absolutely great. It's got excellent fit and finish, which is another just absolute joy here. I mean, looking at this, there is nothing that is done wrong in terms of execution that could have been done otherwise. Look, this is a beautifully made knife, 100%. Rayot does great work, and I think Arcform was really wise to partner up with him here for this particular knife. So to me, that is absolutely what's great about this, is that this knife is beautifully made with an incredible action and just great construction, fit, and finish overall. Let's talk about what's not so great, the bad. Okay, so on the bad side, first off, some nitpicks. I don't love the fact that the pivot is splitting up this beautiful line between carbon fiber and titanium. It's just an aesthetic thing, but I kind of wish this was a smaller pivot or something like that. And then the other thing is the screws here. I'm not a big fan of having these screws in the middle of this carbon fiber, especially with the kind of glossiness that they've got, because in many lights, it really breaks up the carbon fiber and whatnot. And so either have those be matte, or in the future, find some other way to attach the carbon fiber, which certainly would be hard. That would be nice, though. If they're going to do something like this in the future, I'd like to see a different solution there. Not a big deal, though. Speaking of not big deals, the clip on this guy is branded. They've put their name right on the outside of the clip, right at the top, and it's not a big deal, but it's one of those things that I just don't like. It doesn't feel very classy to me. It's ugly. I don't know. It's a nice logo, beautiful typography, I guess, okay, but it doesn't sit well with me. Speaking of things that just don't sit well, and this is probably not a problem. I may be just crazy here, but look at this. This is the lock face. This is where the blade, the lock bar actually touches the blade. And that lock face is actually external to the knife. And so, I don't know that that's actually a problem. The steel is very hard, but I worry that if I drop this guy, I could affect the lockup in a way that you don't have that worry with many knives where the lock face is very much inside the knife, where it's very well protected. Something like that. That's probably completely irrational and paranoid of me, but it's something that I've not seen before, and so it just strikes me as a little bit odd. But again, all of those things are nitpicks. They're not major issues. Moving on to the things that I think are more issues is the fuller on this guy. This is a useless fuller. I mean, I'm not a big fan of fullers in general, but this one particularly because at least many fullers allow you to flick the knife open with a middle finger motion. And if I was Sabretooth from X-Men and had adamantium fingernails, I could maybe slide one in and pop this guy open. But as it stands, no, not particularly. And it doesn't even really offer you that much purchase for doing a two-hand open. I mean, I would grab down here anyways. And so this fuller to me exists for no reason except to look pretty and to capture crud. And I would have almost preferred that they just take the grind up a little bit higher, and but whatever. The fullers, they always bug me. That's not a thing for me. Next thing, these fins in the back here are, unfortunately, I'm not a big fan of those really ever. A lot of people try and do them, and especially when it's under the pocket clip, it is not a great thing, because every time you take taking this in and out of your pocket. Although luckily the clip itself is on a smooth region, these are going to snap against the fabric of your pocket here, and so this will eat your pants in a slightly more unpleasant way than usual. And it does cause a bit of a hot spot having these guys down in there, even though they've tried to chamfer them, and indeed you can see some chamfers on there. I really don't like these fins, and I think the knife would be substantially better, although maybe a little less pretty with those guys milled out. But whatever, not a big deal. But a bigger deal for me is the ergonomics. This guy just doesn't really work, because having, in a couple of different ways. The clip is absolutely hot spotty. You got hot spots here, you got hot spots off of this guy. The overall shape of the knife doesn't work for me particularly well. This little sharp corner here just doesn't do it for me. And then having the blade swedge go all the way back here means that your thumb is resting on a very thin portion of the blade up here. And so in a saber grip, it's not doing it for me particularly. I'm not a big fan of that. And so overall, ergonomically, in my smaller hands than most, maybe it's going to be great in big hands, this just isn't doing it for me really at all. Then finally on the bad side, this is a very expensive knife. They're doing a lot here for the money, and there's a lot of material and whatnot, so it's not like, oh my god, terrible, but $350 is a good deal of money, and it puts it up against the best of the best. And so that's going to be a deciding factor for a lot of people above and beyond any functional other issues here. So that is to me what's bad here, is that the price is absolutely high, but it's a Rayot. That tends to be the case. The ergos are just poor for me. The fins here are a hot spot and kind of cause pocketing trouble. Not a big fan of the useless fuller. And then a bunch of nitpicks. I don't like the branded clip. I don't like the, little details. But that's not a big deal. Let's talk about what is a big deal, the ugly. First off, on the ugly side, this knife is super thick. And I mean that in every sense. The blade stock is super thick. It is absolutely needlessly thick. The handle thickness, all these materials are very, very thick. And again, if you're doing the CF inlay, I understand you need a little bit of extra. But look, you are not allowed to call a knife that is this damn thick on every dimension the Slimfoot. If they were to take this knife and just squish it down entirely so that everything became thinner, the blade stock, hell, even if they just thinned out the blade stock on this, it would be a 90% more compelling knife for me. You cannot call this the Slimfoot. That would be like calling me the objective foot. No matter how much I want it to be true, repeating it does not help. I am not objective, and this is not slim. So the name, coupled with the thickness, really does bug me, and unfortunately it means that this is not going to be great for thick sort of cutting materials. If you're cutting into an apple, this will crack the apple apart. If you're cutting into hard cell foam, this will drag like crazy. If you're cutting into rigid cardboard, it will snag. And so I really, really don't like the thickness of this knife. Next thing, the bottom of the heel of the blade here is just not great for a couple of reasons. One is that although they've got something that looks like a sharpening choil, you can see here that the sharpening actually ends pretty abruptly. They have an area up here which is completely unsharpened. Part of this is because the plunge is fairly gradual, but part of this is because they're covering for another issue, and that is our final piece of ugly. And that is that this knife has an exposed blade in the back. It is not terrible because they have left this bottom portion unsharpened. You can see right here that they're trying their best to protect you from this knife. But the edge of the blade is very, very close to the back of the knife in a bunch of ways, and so if you've got smaller fingers, this can and will absolutely cut you open as you slide your fingers into the pocket. This is a common consequence of a flow-through design with overly thick blade stock, and particularly when you're trying to keep the handle very slim in this dimension, then you can run into this problem. But this is sort of one of those fundamental issues for me. A folding knife should not cut things when it is folded, and unfortunately, this knife is very much able to cut things, and particularly if you sharpen it a little bit better down here in the future, then it becomes outright dangerous because the non-sharpened portion is right up here. And so I really, really dislike that. I've been seeing it a lot lately, and it bugs the crap out of me. They really, really need to make sure that the knife is safe when closed above all freaking else. And so to me, that is what's ugly here, is that when the knife is closed, the blade is very closely exposed. And then, in order to avoid that being dangerous, they've had to leave this bottom part unsharpened, despite there being a sharpening choil on there, which is not quite far enough anyways to cover that. And then finally, despite it being the Slimfoot, this is freaking thick. And so, those are the ugly things to me. Let's talk about your final conclusions here. Look, final conclusion, I feel like this is an Instagram knife, through and through. It is a knife that is more meant for social media, for sharing, and for knife collecting than it is as a, series cutting tool. Because it looks beautiful in pictures, 100%, and it checks all the boxes, so to speak. All the things that people talk about on knife forums, it's like they threw them into a jar, shook the jar around, and this fell out the bottom. Because it's got high-end steel, carbon fiber, hollow grind, great action, which looks great on an Instagram clip. It's got great construction by a great factory. It's even got nice, obvious photogenic details. Things like your backspacer thing, your fins here, which are, again, great to the eye, just terrible to the pocket. I mean, really, the result is something that is instantly recognizable as a high-end, modern folding sort of knife. And at that level, if that's what you're after, this is a great thing. I mean, it is custom-made for you. It is a beautiful object that also cuts things. And I can absolutely acknowledge it is nicely made, very photogenic, great finishing, and absolutely can cut. And in fact, it cuts better than I expected because of that hollow grind there. And so, on the principle of different grinds for different kinds, I can see how some people would be in love with this knife. Is coming at this from my own unique sort of function-forward perspective. This knife drives me absolutely nuts. I mean, seriously, this displays the main issues from 26% of my currently filmed knife gripes with knife news. It is another FRIPA flame lock with a billboarded clip where they miss the sharpening choil. The clip is over a rough region, and it needs chamfering on sharp edges and corners. It's got an unnecessary fuller. It's got a free spinning pivot, and the blade can cut you while closed. And then on top of that, it's got poor ergonomics, at least for me, a $350 price tag, and they're rubbing salt in my wounds by calling an overly thick-bladed knife the Slimfoot. I mean, it's like this was just tailor-made to grind my gears, and as you can probably tell, I don't like this knife. It's not terrible, it's not dangerous, I mean, aside from the exposed blade thing, and it's not junk, it's not a Z-Hunter. But the thing is, it feels like a triumph of form over function, and a death by 1,000 missteps. I cannot imagine, as a result, as it is right now, a situation where I would recommend this knife over the other options at $350. Look, I really hope that Arcform is able to follow this up with a more polished and more function-forward sort of design, because I am always happy to see more high-end production work and more high-end production brands in the world. Arcform, I wish you the best, and with this sort of build quality, and it's clear that you're not sparing expenses here, your next effort will surely be a stellar knife, but the Slimfoot, as it is just an absolute miss for me. It's 10 pounds of nope and a 5-pound bag. And so, although I can acknowledge that this is absolutely going to be just what some subset of the knife community wants, that's fine. And if you're not bothered by any of the issues I mentioned, then sure, whatever, pick one up, you'll probably love it. But frankly, this is just a knife that drove me nuts, and that I really disliked, that I do not recommend, and that I am going to be very happy to send back to its very generous owner. So, John, thank you very much for sending the knife along. Arcform, all the best. I'm really hoping for round 2. And everybody else, I hope this has been interesting and that you have yourselves an absolutely wonderful rest of the day. Bye now.